Somewhere, far beyond Earth, past the warmth of the sun, past the silence of deep space, there is a world unlike anything you've ever seen. A planet so vast, so light, that it could float on water. This is Saturn. But tonight, you're not just looking at it. You're falling toward it, faster and faster, pulled by a gravity you can't escape. The rings grow larger. The light begins to fade. And then, you pass the edge. No ground, no surface. No way to stop. Just deeper and deeper into something we barely understand. So what really happens if you keep falling past Saturn? And more importantly, would you ever come back? Welcome to falling into space. And tonight, you're not watching the universe. You're falling into it. You are still falling. At first, it doesn't feel like falling at all. There is no wind rushing past your face, no sense of speed, no ground disappearing beneath your feet. Just silence, a perfect, endless silence. But you are moving, faster than any aircraft ever built, faster than anything your mind is used to understanding. And ahead of you, growing slowly in the darkness, is Saturn. At this distance, it doesn't look real. A pale golden sphere, wrapped in impossibly thin rings, floating in a sea of black. It looks delicate, fragile, almost harmless. But that illusion won't last, because the closer you fall, the more Saturn begins to reveal what it really is. At first, the rings are just lines of light, thin, flat, perfect, like someone drew them across the sky. But as you continue falling, they expand. Layer by layer, structure appears, gaps, shadows, waves of ice and dust. What looked like a single ring is actually thousands of separate bands, each made of countless particles, chunks of ice, some no bigger than grains of sand, others as large as mountains, and you are heading straight toward them. There is no warning, no boundary, no moment where a voice tells you to stop. You simply enter. 1 second, empty space. The next, chaos. You pass through Saturn's rings at incredible speed. Ice fragments drift silently around you, catching sunlight in brief flashes like frozen sparks in the dark. Some pieces are tiny, harmless. Others are not. Massive blocks of ice, kilometers wide, float like invisible walls. You don't see them coming. You don't hear them, because in space, there is no sound, only motion, only impact. But somehow, you keep falling, deeper now, beyond the rings, and that's when things begin to change. The light fades, not completely, but enough. Saturn is far from the sun, more than 1 billion kilometers away. Here, sunlight is weak, distant, cold. The golden glow you saw from afar begins to disappear, replaced by something darker, something heavier. Now, Saturn fills your entire vision. It's no longer a planet in the distance. It's a wall, an enormous curved horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. But something feels wrong, because the closer you get, the less solid it looks. There is no surface, no ground waiting for you, no place to land, because Saturn isn't like Earth. It's made mostly of gas, hydrogen, helium, layers upon layers, with no clear boundary between sky and planet. So as you fall, you don't hit anything, you just enter. At first, it feels like nothing, like falling into a cloud, a thin mist brushing past you, almost gentle, almost peaceful. But that feeling doesn't last. The deeper you go, the thicker it becomes. The pressure begins to rise, slowly, then faster. The gas around you becomes denser, heavier, pushing against you from every direction. Above you, space is disappearing. The black sky fades into a hazy gray, then darker, then gone. You are no longer in space. You are inside Saturn. And now, the fall becomes real. Gravity pulls harder, stronger than before, because now you are closer to the planet's mass, accelerating deeper, faster, with every second. There is no stopping, no slowing down, only descent. Winds begin to form around you. At first, just movement, then force. Saturn's atmosphere is not calm. It is violent, unpredictable. Storms stretch across the planet, larger than entire worlds, and now you are falling into them. The wind speed increases, hundreds of kilometers per hour, then more, then far beyond anything experienced on Earth. You are no longer just falling. You are being torn through layers of atmosphere by forces you cannot control. Temperature begins to drop, then rise, then shift unpredictably. Because Saturn's atmosphere is complex, strange, not stable, different gases, different layers, each reacting in ways that feel almost alive. Above you, the last trace of space disappears completely. Below you, there is only darkness and pressure and depth, endless depth. But here's the truth no one expects. You are still nowhere near the center. Saturn is enormous, so vast that even after minutes of falling, you've barely scratched its outer layers, and yet, already, everything is changing. The pressure now is crushing, not instantly, but gradually. Your body feels it every second, heavier, every breath harder. The gas around you is no longer light, it's dense, thick, almost liquid. And still, you keep falling. Because there is no surface to stop you, no ground to catch you. Only deeper layers, more pressure, more heat, more darkness. And something else, waiting below. Something far more extreme than anything you've experienced so far. Something that will change everything about this fall. Forever. And as you descend, one question becomes impossible to ignore. If there's no surface, how far can you really fall? You are still falling, but now the idea of falling begins to change. It is no longer a clean descent through empty space. It is resistance, pressure, density. The invisible atmosphere around you has become something you can feel, something that pushes back against every movement. Something that reminds you with every second that you are no longer in the emptiness of space. You are inside a giant. The light from above is almost gone now. What used to be a faint glow from the distant sun has faded into a dim, cold haze. Shapes disappear, colors dissolve. The world around you becomes a shifting gradient of darkness and muted gold. And yet, even in this dimness, motion never stops. You are accelerating. Saturn's gravity is still pulling you inward, deeper, faster, toward a place no human has ever seen. The atmosphere thickens around you, and what once felt like falling through a cloud now feels like moving through a heavy fluid. Hydrogen and helium, the simplest elements in the universe, are no longer gentle gases here. They are compressed, crowded, forced together by the immense weight of everything above. Every kilometer you descend adds more pressure, more weight, more force pressing in from all directions. It is not sudden, it is not violent, it is gradual but relentless. And that is what makes it terrifying. There is no moment of impact, no clear point where everything changes. Instead, everything is changing all the time, slowly building, slowly tightening, slowly transforming the environment around you into something completely alien. The winds begin to surround you more aggressively now. What was once a distant movement in the atmosphere has become a dominant force. Saturn's winds are among the fastest in the entire solar system, reaching speeds that can exceed 1,800 kilometers per hour. But here, deep inside, those winds do not feel like air rushing past you. They feel like currents, like massive streams flowing in different directions, colliding, twisting, dragging you along unpredictable paths. You are no longer falling in a straight line. You are being carried, pushed, redirected by forces far larger than yourself. It is like being caught inside a planetary ocean, except there is no water, only compressed gas behaving like something thicker, heavier, more powerful. Temperature begins to rise, slowly at first, almost unnoticeably. The cold emptiness of space is long gone. The deeper you go, the more heat builds around you. This heat does not come from the sun. It comes from Saturn itself. The planet radiates energy, leftover heat from its formation, combined with the immense pressure compressing its interior. As the pressure increases, so does the temperature, creating a deep, hidden furnace beneath the layers above. You are falling toward that furnace now, even if you cannot see it. There is no glow, no visible fire, only the creeping sensation that the environment is becoming less survivable with every passing moment. The sky above you is completely gone. There is no sense of up or down anymore, only direction, only inward. If you tried to look back, you would see nothing but dense, endless layers fading into darkness. There is no horizon, no landmark, no reference point. You are surrounded on all sides by Saturn itself. This is what it means to fall into a gas giant. You do not land. You disappear inside it. You become part of its endless interior, lost between layers that stretch for tens of thousands of kilometers. And still, you are only scratching the surface. That is the part that is hardest to understand. Despite everything you have already experienced, despite the crushing pressure, the violent winds, the rising heat, you are still far from the deepest regions of Saturn. The planet is so vast that its true interior lies far below, hidden beneath layers that grow more extreme with every kilometer. The hydrogen around you continues to compress, becoming denser, thicker, behaving less like a gas and more like something else entirely. It begins to feel almost liquid, though not in any way that resembles water. This is a state of matter rarely experienced, where the boundaries between gas and liquid begin to blur. As you descend further, the pressure becomes overwhelming. It is no longer something you could survive. It is something that would crush, compress, and destroy anything built on Earth. Structures would collapse. Materials would fail. The human body would not stand a chance. But the fall continues, because this is not about survival anymore. It is about understanding what lies beneath. And beneath Saturn's outer layers lies something far stranger than anyone expects. The hydrogen begins to transform. Under extreme pressure, it is forced into a new state, one that scientists call liquid metallic hydrogen. It is not just dense, it is conductive. It behaves like a metal, capable of carrying electricity. This vast hidden ocean of metallic hydrogen is responsible for Saturn's powerful magnetic field, a field that extends far into space and shapes the environment around the planet. You are falling toward that ocean now, even though it remains invisible in the darkness. There is no clear boundary where gas suddenly becomes metal. It is a gradual transformation, a continuous shift from one state to another, driven entirely by pressure and temperature. The deeper you go, the stronger the forces become. Gravity is still pulling you inward, but now it is competing with something else. The immense pressure from above begins to slow your descent, resisting your motion, compressing everything around you into an increasingly dense environment. It is a strange balance, a constant tension between falling deeper and being held back by the weight of the planet itself. And yet you continue to move. You continue to descend. The heat now is intense, not burning in the way fire burns, but overwhelming, suffocating, inescapable. Temperatures rise to thousands of degrees. The environment is no longer just hostile. It is completely unrecognizable. There is no comparison on Earth, no place where these conditions exist naturally. You are inside a world that operates by different rules, shaped by forces that are almost impossible to imagine. And still, there is more below. Saturn's core lies far beneath you, hidden under tens of thousands of kilometers of crushing layers. Scientists believe it is made of rock, ice, and heavier elements, compressed into a dense, superheated mass. But even this is uncertain, because no probe has ever reached this depth. No instrument has ever measured these conditions directly. Everything we know is based on models, calculations, and indirect observations, which means that as you fall, you are entering a region that is still largely unknown. The deeper you go, the slower your descent becomes. Not because gravity has weakened, but because the density around you is increasing so dramatically that movement itself becomes difficult. It is like trying to move through something that resists every motion, something that pushes back harder the deeper you go. Eventually, you would reach a point where falling is no longer possible in the way you understand it. The concept of falling loses meaning when there is no clear direction, no clear separation between layers, no empty space to move through. And yet, even here, at these unimaginable depths, Saturn does not end. It continues, layer after layer, transition after transition, a world built not of solid ground, but of gradients, of continuous change, of endless descent into conditions that grow more extreme with every step. There is no sudden stop, no final impact, only a gradual slowing, a merging with the environment until the idea of you as something separate from Saturn begins to disappear. Because that is the final truth of falling into a gas giant. You do not land. You do not reach a surface. You become part of it, absorbed into layers that never stop shifting, never stop compressing, never stop transforming. And somewhere far below, beyond where any human understanding can truly reach, lies the deepest part of Saturn, a place that may hold answers, or mysteries, or something we have not even imagined yet. And you are still falling toward it. You are still falling. But now, even that word begins to lose its meaning. There is no clear direction anymore. No sense of down or below. Only a slow, crushing movement deeper into something that no longer feels like a planet, but like a force. The environment around you has changed completely. The hydrogen that once surrounded you like a thick atmosphere has transformed. It is no longer gas. It is no longer even something you could compare to liquid. It has become something stranger, something heavier, something that behaves like metal. You are now inside the vast ocean of metallic hydrogen, a place where pressure is so extreme that atoms themselves are forced into a new state. Electrons move freely, energy flows through the material, and everything around you becomes part of a massive, planet-wide system of motion and electricity. This is where Saturn truly comes alive, because this layer, this hidden ocean, is what generates its magnetic field, a field so large, so powerful, that it extends millions of kilometers into space. But here, inside it, you wouldn't see that field. You would feel it. Not as a shock, not as a sudden burst of energy, but as a constant, invisible force moving through everything. The environment is no longer calm. It is active, dynamic, almost alive. Currents of metallic hydrogen flow around you, driven by heat rising from deep below. They twist, they collide, they create enormous electrical movements that ripple through the planet's interior. And you are inside it, still moving, still descending. But something is changing. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to move at all. The density around you is overwhelming now. This is not like falling through air. This is not even like sinking through water. This is like trying to move through something that resists you at every level, something that becomes more solid with every passing moment. Gravity is still pulling you inward, but it no longer feels like acceleration. It feels like pressure, because now everything is pushing back. The heat is rising rapidly, thousands of degrees, hotter than lava, hotter than most places on Earth could ever reach. But there is no fire here, no flames, no light, only darkness and heat and force. If anything could survive this far, this is where it would begin to fail. Not instantly, but completely, because here, structure itself cannot hold. Atoms are compressed, materials lose their form, everything begins to break down under the weight of the planet above. And yet, you continue. Because Saturn is not finished, not yet. Far below this metallic ocean, there is something else, something that has been hidden since the beginning of the solar system, something that formed billions of years ago, when this planet was still young. A core. But not a core like Earth. Not a solid, defined surface you could stand on. Not something simple. Because under this much pressure, nothing stays simple. As you descend further, the metallic hydrogen begins to change again. It becomes thicker, more compressed, more unstable. Transitions begin to blur. The environment becomes harder to define. Gas, liquid, metal. None of these words fully apply anymore. You are entering a region where physics itself becomes unfamiliar, where the rules you understand start to bend. The pressure here is beyond anything experienced anywhere on Earth, millions of times greater than the pressure at sea level, enough to crush anything, to compress matter into forms that should not exist under normal conditions. And still, there is no surface, no ground, no sudden stop. Only a gradual shift, a deepening, a slow transformation of everything around you. Then, something changes. Not suddenly, not violently, but noticeably. The descent slows. More than before. Movement becomes difficult, almost impossible, because now the density is so extreme that the idea of falling no longer applies. You are no longer moving through something. You are being absorbed by it. This is where Saturn's core begins, or at least, where scientists believe it does. A mixture of rock, ice, heavier elements, all compressed together into a superheated, dense mass. But even this description is uncertain, because no one has ever seen it. No probe has ever reached this depth. Everything we know is based on calculations, on models, on guesses. And those guesses suggest something surprising. The core may not even be solid. It may be partially dissolved, blended into the surrounding layers. A fuzzy core with no clear boundary, no edge, no place where one layer ends and another begins. Which means, even here, there is no true bottom. You don't land, you don't arrive, you don't reach a final destination. You simply slow down until movement itself becomes impossible. Until the difference between you and Saturn begins to disappear. Because at this depth, you are no longer separate. You are part of the pressure, part of the heat, part of the planet itself. And somewhere above you, far beyond reach, are the rings, the light, the empty silence of space. But down here, there is no silence, no space, no escape. Only Saturn, endless, immense, unfinished. And the truth becomes clear. Falling into Saturn is not a journey with an end. It is a process, a transformation, a slow descent into a world that does not let you go. Because once you pass the rings, once you enter the clouds, once you fall beyond the layers of gas and into the depths below, there is no way back. Not because something stops you, not because you hit a surface, but because Saturn never gives you one. And as the last traces of movement fade, as the pressure surrounds you from every direction, as the heat erases everything you once were, one final realization remains. You didn't just fall past Saturn. You disappeared inside it. You are no longer moving. And yet the story isn't over. Because even here, in what feels like the deepest possible part of Saturn, something is still happening. The planet is not silent. It is not still. It is not frozen in time. Around you, even in this region where motion has almost disappeared, energy continues to flow. Heat rises slowly from below, carried through layers that stretch for tens of thousands of kilometers. Currents that began far above, within storms and winds, continue their journey downward, transformed by pressure into something slower, heavier, but never truly at rest. Saturn is alive in a way that is difficult to imagine. Not alive like a creature, but alive as a system, a machine built from gravity, heat, and time. And now, something unexpected begins to happen. Because this is not just the end of a fall, it is the beginning of a different kind of journey. If you could somehow observe this place, not as a human body, but as something capable of enduring these conditions, you would begin to notice that nothing here stays the same forever. Even in this crushing stillness, change continues, slowly, silently, relentlessly. Materials shift, layers mix, elements that were once separated begin to blend. The core of Saturn is not stable in the way we once believed. It is dissolving, spreading outward, mixing with the metallic hydrogen above, becoming less like a center and more like a transition. This means that Saturn is evolving, even now, after billions of years. The planet you fell into is not the same planet that existed when the solar system was young, and it will not be the same billions of years from now. Heat continues to escape, very slowly, through the vast layers above. This heat drives motion, creates currents, feeds the storms you saw when you first approached. Those massive bands of clouds, those endless winds, they are powered by what is happening down here. Everything is connected, from the deepest interior to the outermost rings. And those rings, the ones you passed through at the beginning of your fall, they are not permanent. They are fragile, temporary, made of ice and dust that slowly spreads, breaks apart, and disappears over time. Which means that one day, Saturn will look completely different. The rings will fade, the storms will change, the interior will continue to mix, to shift, to evolve. And the place where you are now, this deep, hidden region, will not remain as it is. Because nothing in the universe is truly static, not even a giant like Saturn. If you could wait long enough, millions, even billions of years, you would witness something extraordinary, the slow transformation of an entire world. The core may continue to dissolve, blending further into the surrounding layers, changing the structure of the planet itself. The heat trapped inside will gradually escape, reducing the energy that drives Saturn's internal motion, slowing the currents, weakening the storms. Eventually, far in the future, Saturn may become quieter, colder, less active. But even then, it will still exist, still massive, still present, still a silent giant in the outer solar system. And what about you? At this depth, that question no longer has meaning, because you cannot exist here. Not as a body, not as a form, not as something separate. Everything that once defined you would have been broken down long ago, compressed, heated, transformed. Your atoms, if they could persist, would not remain together. They would scatter, mix, become part of the surrounding material. Not destroyed, but changed. And over time, those atoms might rise again, carried slowly upward by currents within the planet, through layers of metallic hydrogen, through dense gas, through storms and clouds, until one day, far beyond anything you could experience, they might reach the upper atmosphere, and from there, they might escape. Not as you, not as anything recognizable, but as particles drifting once again into space, returning to the vast, silent emptiness you came from. This is the cycle of matter in the universe. Nothing truly disappears. It only changes form, moves from one place to another, from one state to another. So what happens if you keep falling past Saturn? You don't reach an end. You don't find a surface. You don't discover a hidden world waiting below. Instead, you become part of something larger, something older, something that continues long after your fall has stopped. A planet that does not need you to exist. A system that continues, whether you are there or not. And in the end, that is the most unsettling truth of all. The universe does not stop for you. It does not notice your fall. It does not change because you entered it. You fall, you fade, you become part of it. And Saturn continues, endless, silent, unreachable. And somewhere, far above, the stars are still shining, as if nothing ever happened. You never actually stopped. It only felt that way. Deep within Saturn, where pressure balanced gravity and motion slowed to almost nothing, the idea of falling seemed to disappear. But the truth is, the planet itself never stops moving. Heat continues to rise. Material continues to shift. And over time, even the deepest layers are part of a slow, massive circulation that spans the entire world. So somewhere within that crushing stillness, something begins again. Not a sudden drop, not a dramatic descent, but a gradual, almost invisible drift. The currents that move through Saturn's interior are powerful, even if they are slow. They carry energy upward, transporting heat from the depths toward the outer layers. And anything within those currents, anything broken down into particles small enough to be carried, becomes part of that movement. If something could remain, if anything could survive as matter rather than structure, it would not stay at the center forever. It would rise, not quickly, not in any way that resembles motion you understand, but slowly, over immense spans of time, thousands of years, millions, possibly longer. Because Saturn is not just deep, it is vast beyond comprehension. The distance from its outer clouds to its deepest interior stretches tens of thousands of kilometers, and every layer resists movement, slows it, transforms it. But the motion never stops, and so the journey changes direction. What once felt like falling inward begins, almost imperceptibly, to become something else, a return. As the material moves upward, the environment changes again. Pressure begins to ease, but only slightly at first. The density remains extreme, still far beyond anything familiar. The heat is still overwhelming, but it begins to shift, fluctuating as it moves through different layers of the planet's interior. The metallic hydrogen slowly transitions back, not suddenly, not at a clear boundary, but gradually. The structure loosens. The rigid, conductive state begins to give way to something less dense, something more fluid. Electrons that once moved freely through a metallic medium begin to behave differently as the pressure drops. Layer by layer, the environment transforms. The ascent is not smooth. Saturn's interior is filled with currents, flows that twist and interact in complex ways. Material does not rise in a straight line. It is carried, redirected, pulled sideways, sometimes pushed back downward before continuing upward again. It is a slow, chaotic movement governed by forces that operate on a planetary scale. Time loses its meaning here. There is no day, no night, no cycle to mark the passing of hours. Only change, measured over spans so vast that they defy human understanding. And yet, the direction is clear. Upward, back toward the outer layers, back toward the place where the journey began. As the pressure continues to decrease, the environment begins to resemble something closer to an atmosphere again. Not like Earth's, not even remotely similar, but less extreme than the depths below. Hydrogen returns to a more familiar state, though still compressed, still heavy. The heat begins to disperse, spreading through the layers above. Movement becomes easier, faster. The currents accelerate as they approach regions where the density is lower, where energy can move more freely. And eventually, after an unimaginable span of time, the upper atmosphere comes into reach. The darkness begins to change. A faint glow appears, not from below, but from above. Light, distant, weak, but unmistakable. The sun, after everything, after the endless descent, the crushing pressure, the transformation, the slow rise through layers of gas and metallic hydrogen. Light returns. The upper clouds of Saturn come into view once again. Massive, swirling bands of color stretch across the planet, shaped by winds that move faster than anything on Earth. Storm systems churn endlessly, powered by the heat rising from deep within, the same heat that carried everything upward. This is where the planet becomes visible again, where structure returns, where movement becomes violent once more. The winds are intense here, tearing through the atmosphere at incredible speeds. The calm, crushing stillness of the interior is replaced by chaos, by motion, by energy that is constantly shifting and evolving. And eventually, something remarkable happens. The pull of Saturn begins to weaken. Not completely, not suddenly, but enough. As the material reaches the outermost layers, some of it is no longer bound tightly to the planet. The immense gravity that once pulled everything inward loses its grip, just enough to allow small particles to escape. Not all of them. Most will remain, cycling through the atmosphere, rising and falling over and over again, but some will leave. They drift upward, carried by the outer edges of the atmosphere, pushed by energy, by motion, by forces that extend beyond the planet itself. And then they are free, back into space, back into the cold, silent vacuum where the journey began. But nothing is the same, because the path they followed, the descent and ascent through Saturn, has changed everything about them. They are no longer part of a structure, no longer part of a single identity. They are fragments, particles, drifting once again through the universe. And from here, the possibilities are endless. They may be pulled toward another planet, captured by another star. They may drift for millions of years, alone in the darkness, traveling distances so vast that they pass through regions of space no human has ever observed. Or perhaps, one day, they will become part of something new, a new world, a new atmosphere, a new structure formed from the same elements that once fell into Saturn. Because this is how the universe works. Nothing stays in one place forever. Nothing remains unchanged. Everything moves. Everything transforms. Everything becomes something else. And so, the journey that began as a simple fall becomes part of something far greater. Not a straight line, not a single event, but a cycle. Endless, repeating. A movement of matter through space, through planets, through time itself. And somewhere, far away, far above the clouds of Saturn, far beyond the reach of its gravity, the stars are still there, silent, watching, as everything continues, as it always has, as it always will. You are no longer falling, and you are no longer rising in any way that resembles a journey. What remains is motion without intention, drift without direction, existence without form. Far beyond the clouds of Saturn, where the pull of gravity weakens just enough, the last fragments that once descended into that giant world begin to spread into the surrounding space. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, almost silently, as if the universe itself is exhaling. Here, in the outer reaches of Saturn's influence, everything feels different again. The crushing pressure is gone. The overwhelming heat has faded. What remains is cold, a deep, penetrating cold that stretches in every direction. Space is not empty in the way it seems. It is filled with faint traces of particles, radiation, invisible fields that connect everything across unimaginable distances. And now, those fragments, once carried through storms, through metallic oceans, through the deepest layers of a planet, become part of that vast environment. There is no longer a sense of scale you can understand. Saturn, once an endless horizon of clouds and storms, begins to shrink. Its rings, once massive structures stretching across the sky, become thin lines again, delicate, almost fragile, suspended in darkness. And as distance grows, even that fades. The planet becomes just another object among countless others, one world among billions scattered across the galaxy. And still, motion continues, because nothing in the universe is ever truly stilled. Even here, far from the chaos of Saturn's interior, forces are at work. Gravity from distant bodies pulls gently, subtly, shaping paths that unfold over millions of years. Radiation from the sun pushes outward, influencing tiny particles, guiding their slow drift through space. Magnetic fields stretch and twist, invisible but powerful, leaving their imprint on everything they touch. This is where the journey changes once more, not into something violent, not into something extreme, but into something vast, something quiet, something almost impossible to perceive. Time begins to stretch. Without a planet around you, without a reference point, time loses its rhythm. There is no sunrise, no sunset, no cycle to mark its passing. Seconds, years, centuries. They blur together into a single, continuous flow. And within that flow, movement becomes something measured, not in speed, but in distance crossed over unimaginable spans. A fragment drifts, pulled slightly toward one direction, then another. Paths curve, not because something forces them suddenly, but because everything in the universe is connected through gravity. Even distant stars, light years away, exert influence, shaping trajectories in ways that are too slow to notice, but too powerful to ignore. And as this drift continues, something else becomes visible. The stars, not as small points of light scattered randomly across the sky, but as a structure, a pattern, a vast system stretching beyond comprehension. You begin to see that space is not just emptiness. It is filled with regions, with clusters, with clouds of gas and dust that form the building blocks of future worlds. Somewhere far away, a nebula glows faintly, a region where new stars are being born. Clouds of hydrogen collapse under their own gravity, heating, compressing, igniting nuclear fusion that will shine for billions of years. Around those newborn stars, disks of material begin to form, spinning, colliding, gathering into larger and larger structures. Planets, moons, rings, systems that may one day look just like Saturn once did. And within this immense cycle, nothing is isolated. The particles that once fell into Saturn, that were compressed, transformed, carried through its depths, are not lost. They are part of this larger story. Over time, they may drift toward these regions of formation. They may become part of new clouds, new disks, new worlds that do not yet exist. And this is where the scale of everything becomes clear. What felt like a single journey, a fall into one planet, is only a moment in something far larger. Because the universe does not operate on the scale of human experience. It operates on cycles that span billions of years, on movements that connect stars, planets, and galaxies into a single, continuous process of creation and transformation. Saturn itself was once part of that process, formed from a collapsing cloud of gas and dust, growing, shaping, evolving into the giant world you fell into. And one day, far in the future, even Saturn will change. Its rings will disappear, its internal heat will fade, its structure will shift as time reshapes everything. Nothing remains the same. Not planets, not stars, not even galaxies. And within that truth, the journey you began takes on a different meaning. It was never just about falling, never just about reaching a center, never just about what happens inside a planet. It was about understanding that every path, every movement leads into something larger, something that does not end. Because even now, as the fragments drift farther from Saturn, as the cold of space stretches endlessly around them, the journey continues toward other worlds, toward other stars, toward possibilities that have not yet formed. And somewhere far behind, Saturn remains, still turning, still holding its storms and its hidden depths, still a giant in the darkness, but no longer the destination, only a part of the path. And ahead, there is no boundary, no final point, no edge to reach, only space, infinite, silent, and waiting, as everything continues to move, to change, to become something new again and again, forever. You are still moving, even if it no longer feels like a journey. Out here, far beyond Saturn, motion is no longer something you sense. There is no wind, no resistance, no pressure to remind you that anything is happening at all. And yet, you are not still. You are never still. Because in space, stillness does not exist. Everything is always in motion, guided by forces that never truly stop acting. The fragments that once descended through Saturn's immense layers now drift into a region that feels almost empty. But it isn't. The space between planets is filled with faint traces of matter, scattered atoms, particles of dust so small they cannot be seen, yet so numerous that they form a thin, invisible environment stretching across the solar system. This is the interplanetary medium, a quiet ocean of particles and energy, shaped by the sun's influence. Here, the sun still has power, not the warm, bright power you feel on Earth, but a distant, subtle force that reaches billions of kilometers outward. Streams of charged particles flow continuously from the sun, forming what scientists call the solar wind. It moves through space, carrying energy, interacting with anything it touches. And now, these drifting fragments are part of that flow. They are pushed, not violently, not suddenly, but steadily, guided outward, away from the sun. But gravity never fully lets go. Even here, the sun's pull is still present. It curves the paths of everything, bending motion into wide, sweeping arcs that define the structure of the solar system itself. Nothing travels in a straight line forever. Everything follows a path shaped by gravity, by the massive objects that may be millions of kilometers away. And so the journey becomes something else. Not a fall, not a rise, but an orbit or something close to it, a slow, endless path through space. Saturn is now just a distant memory, a pale point of light fading into the background of countless others. Its rings, once vast and dominating, are no longer visible. Its storms, its winds, its crushing depths, all hidden again, lost behind distance and scale. What once felt infinite now feels small, and that is the nature of the universe. Everything changes depending on where you stand or where you drift. Ahead, something new begins to take shape. At first, it is almost nothing, a faint haze, a slight increase in density, barely noticeable. But over time, as motion continues, that haze grows. It becomes a region, a cloud, a structure forming within the darkness. This is not a planet. Not yet. This is something earlier. A gathering of particles, dust, gas, fragments of matter that have slowly come together under the influence of gravity. These clouds exist throughout space, sometimes invisible, sometimes glowing faintly as they interact with radiation from nearby stars. And now, the fragments drifting from Saturn begin to enter one of these regions. The environment changes again. The emptiness of space becomes slightly less empty. Particles are more frequent. Collisions, though still rare, begin to happen. Tiny impacts, small interactions that barely alter motion, but over long periods of time begin to matter. Because this is how new worlds begin, not with sudden events, but with accumulation, with countless small interactions that slowly build something larger. As particles move through this region, they begin to stick. Not strongly at first, just enough for clusters to form. Dust grains attach to one another. Fragments combine. Over time, these clusters grow, from microscopic particles to larger grains, to objects that begin to have shape, mass, and presence. Gravity strengthens as mass increases. The larger the clusters become, the more they begin to attract other material. The process accelerates, slowly at first, then more rapidly. This is the early stage of planetary formation, a process that takes millions of years, a process that has happened countless times across the universe. And now, the same material that once fell into Saturn becomes part of something new. The cloud thickens. Regions within it begin to collapse. Gravity pulls material inward, creating dense areas where collisions become more frequent, where growth becomes faster. And within one of these regions, something begins to stand out. A center. Not a core like Saturn's, not yet, but a point where mass is gathering more quickly than anywhere else, where material flows inward, drawn by the growing gravitational pull. Around this forming center, a disk begins to appear. Material does not fall straight in. It spreads, it rotates, it forms a flat, spinning structure where particles collide, merge, and continue to grow. This is how planets are born. And within this disk, everything is moving. Everything is interacting. Everything is changing. The fragments that once drifted through space, that once fell into a gas giant, that once were compressed and transformed, are now part of this new system. Over time, the growing mass at the center becomes something recognizable, not fully formed, not complete, but distinct, a protoplanet. Its gravity strengthens. It begins to dominate its region, sweeping up nearby material, clearing its path, growing larger, heavier, more defined. And around it, remnants remain, rings of debris, fragments that have not yet merged, echoes of earlier stages of formation. This is where the cycle begins to mirror itself. Because one day, if this process continues, if enough material gathers, if the conditions are right, this new world could become something familiar. A planet with layers, with atmosphere, with structure. Perhaps even a gas giant, like Saturn. And if that happens, then everything that was once part of Saturn, everything that fell, that dissolved, that drifted, will have become part of something new, a new world, a new system, a new beginning. And the journey that started with a fall does not end. It transforms. Because in the universe, there is no true ending, only change, only movement, only the endless process of matter becoming something else. And somewhere, far away, another world waits to be formed. Another system begins to take shape. Another cycle begins again. And you are part of it, not as a traveler, not as an observer, but as matter, as something that moves, that changes, that becomes part of the universe itself. And as the cloud continues to collapse, as the disk spins, as the new world grows, one truth remains. You never stopped falling. You just started becoming something else. You are no longer drifting alone. The cloud around you has changed. What was once a faint, scattered haze has become something structured, something alive with motion. Not alive like a creature, but alive in the way only the universe can be. Constantly forming, constantly evolving, constantly building something from nothing. The region you have entered is no longer quiet. Particles collide more often now. Not violently, not explosively, but frequently enough that change begins to accelerate. Dust grains that once moved freely now meet each other, cling together, and form something slightly larger. Those larger pieces begin to attract more matter, pulling in anything that drifts too close. This is no longer random movement. This is formation. And somewhere within this growing cloud, a center is beginning to take control. Gravity is subtle at first. It doesn't pull you suddenly or forcefully. It simply bends your path, a slight curve, a gentle redirection. But over time, that small influence becomes undeniable. Everything around you begins to move in patterns, orbiting an invisible point that grows stronger with every passing moment. The center is forming. As more material gathers, the environment becomes brighter. Not because of a nearby star, but because of friction. Collisions release energy. Heat builds. Tiny flashes of light appear as particles strike each other at high speeds, transforming motion into warmth. The once cold darkness begins to glow faintly, as if something is waking up within the cloud. And it is. At the heart of this region, a young object is beginning to take shape. It is not yet a planet, not yet stable, not yet complete, but it is real. A growing mass surrounded by a disk of material that feeds it, that builds it, that defines its future. You are being drawn toward it now, not falling like before, not pulled violently, but guided. Your path curves more sharply. The motion becomes organized, predictable. You are no longer drifting aimlessly through space. You are entering a system. Around the forming center, the disk spins faster. Material closer to the core moves more rapidly, pulled by stronger gravity. Farther out, motion is slower, but still connected, still part of the same structure. Collisions become more intense. Larger fragments crash into one another, breaking apart or merging into even bigger bodies. This is a chaotic process, but within that chaos, there is direction. Over time, the growing mass at the center begins to dominate everything around it. Its gravity strengthens. Its presence becomes undeniable. It pulls in gas. It pulls in dust. It pulls in everything it can reach. And as it grows, it begins to resemble something familiar. A world. Not one with oceans or land or life, but a world with layers, with mass, with identity. The surrounding disk continues to feed it. Material spirals inward, colliding, merging, becoming part of this forming body. Smaller objects are captured. Some are torn apart. Others survive, becoming moons or rings or distant companions within the same system. And within this growing complexity, a pattern begins to emerge. The same pattern that formed Saturn long ago. Because this is not a new process, it is an ancient one. A cycle that has repeated itself countless times across the universe. The fragments that once fell into Saturn, that were compressed, transformed, carried through its depths, have now returned to the earliest stage of that same cycle. They are part of something new, something forming, something that may one day become a planet with storms, with layers, with hidden depths that no one has ever seen. And the scale of it all becomes overwhelming, because this is not happening in one place, not in one system, not even in one galaxy. Everywhere in the universe, clouds like this are forming. Stars are being born. Planets are taking shape. Systems are emerging from the same simple materials, hydrogen, helium, dust, repeating the same process in endless variations. And within that endless repetition, every outcome is different. Some worlds become rocky. Some become gas giants. Some remain small, broken fragments that never fully form. Some may even develop the conditions for life. And all of them begin like this, with drifting particles, with slow collisions, with gravity quietly pulling everything together. You are now part of that beginning. As you move closer to the forming center, the environment becomes more intense. The heat increases. The density rises. The motion becomes faster, more chaotic, more energetic. This is the region where growth is most active, where material is constantly being added, reshaped, reformed. And eventually, you are no longer separate from it. You become part of the forming world. Not as a single piece, not as something recognizable, but as matter, as atoms, as something that contributes to the mass, the structure, the identity of this new object. And just like that, the journey continues. Because one day, far in the future, this forming world may become stable. It may develop layers, an atmosphere, storms, pressure, heat. It may become a planet where something else, something new, could begin a journey of its own. And if that happens, then the path you followed, falling into Saturn, dissolving, drifting through space, becoming part of a new formation, will not be unique. It will be part of the same endless story. A story where matter never rests, where everything moves, transforms, becomes something else, where beginnings and endings are just different points in the same cycle. And as this new world continues to grow, as its gravity strengthens, as its structure becomes more defined, one realization remains. Nothing you experienced was an end. Not the fall, not the depths, not the silence of space. All of it was a transition. From one state to another, from one world to the beginning of the next. And somewhere, far away, Saturn still exists, still turning, still holding its storms and its hidden interior. But now, it is no longer the center of the story, because the story has moved on, and you have become part of something new. You are no longer something that can be followed, no longer something that can be traced. What began as a fall, a simple descent toward a distant world, has stretched far beyond anything that word can contain. Because the truth is, you never just fell past Saturn, you entered a cycle. What once felt like an ending was only a transition. The clouds you passed through, the crushing depths, the metallic oceans hidden beneath the surface, none of it stopped you. It only changed you, broke you apart, carried you into something larger, and then, slowly, returned you to the universe itself, not as a traveler, but as matter. And now, in this final moment, something becomes clear. There is no final destination. The new world forming around you continues to grow. Its gravity strengthens. Its structure becomes more defined. Layers begin to emerge, dense regions at the center, lighter materials spreading outward. Heat builds again. Pressure begins to form. The same forces that once shaped Saturn are now shaping something new. And this is how the universe moves forward, not in straight lines, but in loops, endless loops. The atoms that once existed inside a giant planet now help create another. The material that was compressed under unimaginable pressure now spreads, gathers, and builds again. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. Everything continues. If you could step back, far beyond this system, far beyond the scale of planets and stars, you would see it more clearly. Clouds collapsing, stars igniting, disks forming, worlds emerging, over and over again, across distances so vast they cannot be measured in any meaningful way. And within that vastness, your journey is not unique. It is part of a pattern, a universal process that has been unfolding for billions of years and will continue long after everything you know has faded. The new world continues to change. Collisions shape its surface. Energy flows through its interior. Fragments are captured. Others are thrown away, sent back into space to begin their own paths. And slowly, over immense stretches of time, stability begins to form. A planet is born. It may never look like Saturn. It may never have rings, or storms, or the same structure. Or perhaps it will, because the outcome is never certain. Only the process is. And within that uncertainty lies the most important truth of all. You were never separate from the universe. The fall into Saturn only revealed it. Because at every stage, you are part of something larger. From the moment you left the emptiness of space to the moment you entered the planet, to the depths where pressure erased all structure, to the slow rise back into the darkness, to the formation of something new. Every step was connected. Every moment was part of the same story. There was no boundary between you and the world you entered, only the illusion of separation. And now that illusion is gone, because here, at the end of this journey, there is no you to fall anymore, no edge to cross, no final answer waiting below. Only the universe continuing. The stars remain distant, silent, unchanging in their appearance, yet constantly evolving in ways too slow to see. The space between them stretches endlessly, filled with the same material that built Saturn, that built this new world, that will build countless others in the future. And somewhere, far away, Saturn still exists, a giant in the darkness, its rings slowly fading over time, its storms still moving across its surface, its interior still hiding layers that no one will ever truly see. But it is no longer where the journey ends, because there is no end, only continuation. The fall you began never stopped. It only changed direction, changed form, changed meaning. From falling to becoming, from descending to transforming, from observing to belonging. And that is the final answer. What happens if you keep falling past Saturn? You don't reach a bottom. You don't find a hidden world waiting beneath the clouds. You don't escape unchanged. You become part of something far greater. A cycle that has no beginning, a process that has no end, a universe that does not pause, does not wait, does not care where you started or where you thought you were going. It simply continues. And now, so do you. Not as a person, not as a traveler, but as part of everything. Endless, silent, and still moving through space forever.